Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to be here with you all today. We drove up a couple of days ago, and we're here to meet with Troy and Taryn. And we met with Troy the other night. They're both thinking about perhaps, I guess, going to a school of preaching, and so we met with him the other night, had a good meeting, and knew we were going to miss him today, him being in Childress. But we're hoping to meet a little bit with Taryn here in a few minutes, and of course talk to him about perhaps attending as well. So that's why we're up here, and I'm glad to be here. I was always glad to be in a different part of the country. I'm originally from Northeast Ohio. If you think of Cleveland, Ohio, go about 30 miles away from there, a little place called Windham. I don't know if you know where that's at. Up near Ravenna?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, not too far from Ravenna, in Garrettsville. But that's where I'm from, and my wife's from Indiana, down on the river. When we say the river, we mean the Ohio. And they got a farm there that's been in the family since like 1815. And she's the only one, I think, to ever escape the farm. And everyone's always lived there, so I don't know, you can imagine. But when we got married, that's what she said. She said, "Get me out of here." So we did. Well, anyhow, but we're grateful to be here. So we'll give a presentation on the school this morning, and hopefully Taryn and Troy can watch it later and see more about it. And then we'll deliver the lesson during the worship hour and then this afternoon as well. But the school of preaching at Brown Trail has existed since 1965. We're in our 60th year, and we are the second oldest school of preaching right now. The first being Sunset, which started in Lubbock as a Spanish school of preaching. And so our English department is older than theirs, and they got rid of their Spanish department years ago. And we added a Spanish department about 20 years ago. So anyhow, we've been around since then. And, you know, in 1965, our president was Lyndon B. Johnson, for those of you who may remember. About the coolest thing about 1965 was you could buy a brand new Mustang for about $2,500. And I often tell people, if you happen to have bought one and still have it, I'll refund your money. I'll be glad to do so. And I'll take it home with me. I may leave my family here, take it home, and come back and get them later, right? But anyhow, things have changed in America a lot over the last 60 years. But one thing that hasn't changed is we still need preachers. And the schools of preaching exist for three reasons. The first reason, of course, is the economics. The schools of preaching operate differently than our Christian colleges. Our Christian colleges, of course, are private, so they have to raise their money, which they get from tuition and maybe some from the government, but not much. And room and board at one of our Christian colleges right now, if you're going to study Bible, you're talking $45,000 to $55,000 a year. You do that 4 years, you're coming out owing $170,000, $180,000, $200,000. And then if you are familiar with student loan companies, they want their money back in 10 years. So if you owe $200,000 and they want their money back in 10 years, that's $20,000 a year. And your first preaching job might pay you $35,000 to $40,000. So figure it out. You don't have enough money to live. So the schools of preaching, we are tuition free. And we're able to accomplish that because we raise our money from congregations like this and individuals. And everyone chips in enough, so therefore the students can come and study for free. And then as far as their living expenses, they raise it as well. So, you know, that's $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month, depending on the size of the family and depending on other situations. But the schools of preaching then enable them to graduate, leave, not have any student debt, and therefore they can go to a congregation that might only be able to afford to pay them, you know, $35,000, $40,000 a year. So that's one of the reasons why the schools of preaching exist. Also, we're known for our soundness, meaning we stick to the book. A lot of our Christian colleges these days, unfortunately, they've meandered, if that's a way of saying it. Myself, I did the college route. I started at Ohio Valley College in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and that school has recently closed and due to financing and so forth. And then I transferred to Lipscomb down in Nashville. So I did my education that way, and back in those days, it was still $12,000 a year, way back in the late 80s, early 90s. but things, of course, have changed dramatically since then. But we're known for our soundness. We stick to the book, and we try to train preachers. And we're also more known as technical training schools. We're only a 2-year program, meaning you can come in 2 years, get all the training you need. We teach them not only how to preach, but how to teach classes, how to do door knocking, how to do visitation, visitation in hospitals, visitation in nursing homes. We teach them how to do Bible classes. We teach them how to perform funerals and marriages and all of this stuff. That way they're prepared. And then we got all these new things today called blogging and Facebook and social media. And we teach them how to use all that as well. And then also, as far as technical training, preachers back in the day used to have their libraries, right? If you saw my offices, and I say offices because I've taken over a wing at the school, I've got thousands and thousands and thousands of books. And you could go steal 100 of them and I'd never miss them. And I haven't bought them all, I've just inherited them from, older preachers over the years. So I'm of the old school realm. I like to fill the book. I like, to sit down with my book and highlighter and peruse through it, grab what I want to grab, and then go on. Well, today, everything's online. And we teach them how a computer program that we use called Accordance, it's like $1,200, but you get hundreds and hundreds of books and commentaries and lexicons and things with it. And it really helps them with their developing their Bible classes, developing their sermons, and it's almost a cheat sheet, just to be perfectly honest, in comparison to what our old preachers have to deal with. I've never used AI, but my brother has told me about it, my brother Darren, and he said, you could just go on AI right now and say you want to preach on the atonement, and it gives you an outline in 3 seconds. And they say typically it's very good. So we teach them all this stuff. We don't teach them to cheat, though. We teach them to make their own sermons and own Bible class material. But these new younger preachers coming up, that's just something for you all to look at. If they say we're preaching on the atonement, if you want to know they got their sermon off of AI, well, just do a search real quick, right? And try to figure that out. So things have changed, but we are more like technical training schools. Now, some of our past directors, maybe people you've heard of, maybe not. Roy Deaver was the one that started our school way back in '65. And he said, remember him. Roy was as bright as they come. And he went on and started Brown Trail. He started Southwest School of Preaching in Austin. He started Tennessee Bible College in Cookeville, Tennessee. And he established Fort Worth Christian College there in North Richland Hills where we live. And him and his family are heavily involved in Christian education. His son Mac is down in Sheffield, Texas, and down near Big Bend. He's been down there forever and a day. And his son Roy, that moved on its own, didn't it? His son Roy lives 2 blocks from us. And if you've ever met a Deaver, they all are those high IQ people, unlike me, just very smart, very intelligent, and they're hard workers for the kingdom of God. And then Wendell Winkler was our second director. The Winkler family was big in the South, but they've all moved to Tennessee over the years, and Dan Winkler and others are very famed in the brotherhood. Eddie Witten's still with us. He's 95. They just moved him out of his high-rise apartment in Fort Worth into an assisted living house. He's not happy. I guess no one would be happy with that, but when you're 95, you might need a little help every now and then, right? And then Maxie Bourne, he passed away 8-9 years ago. David Miller's with Apologetics Press and just retired from them. And then my father was the director until 2017, and he passed away on December 31st with some throat bleeding issues at that time. So our current leadership right now, Kevin Rhodes is our director. You can't use your pointer for a TV, right? So he's 2 down from me. I guess that's an easy way of saying it, 2 down from me since they're shorter, right? And he is originally from Texas, Missouri. Him and his father, Orrin, have worked at schools of preaching for a long time. In between him and me is Pat McIntosh. Pat is our academic dean. He graduated from the school, I think, in '87. And he went on, and he's got a couple graduate degrees. He's got a doctorate in Bible, and he's working on a second one right now. That's not a good picture of him. He weighed 400 pounds then. He's down to 194 pounds now. So he's lost over 200 in the last couple years, and he looks a whole lot different than that. And then we have Roy Gafford on the other end. Roy is our Dean of Students. He was a school superintendent for a while in Wichita Falls, and in Dallas, he worked for Dallas Christian. He has a master's degree as well in cardiac recovery and a master's in Christian ministry. So I often tell kids that we're recruiting. If you come to us, we can take care of your heart and your soul with Roy there. But he's a big football coach. At least he thinks he is. He's won 3 state championships in Texas. So he'll run around the office with those big old rings on, that cost $30 to make. Of course, they resemble the pros that cost, $80,000 to make. But he'll wear that from time to time. He looks like a coach, and I always remind him he's not Bill Belichick. But he's a good one. And we now have a Spanish department, as mentioned. And we have Willie Alvarenga, who's standing beside Kevin and Jesse who's standing between Roy and Willie. Jesse is originally from Mexico, came up to America in the 90s. He just got his citizenship a few days ago. He's one of those people that everyone loves, big personality, always smiling. But he came up from Mexico, got caught up in things he shouldn't have got caught up in, and life was heading a certain direction, shouldn't have headed in. And because of this or that, he did obey the gospel, and just a wonderful man. And then Willie is originally from El Salvador. He came to America in the 1980s, and they both speak English. They both went through the English department, but they're a good group, the two, and they do wonderful things together, and we appreciate them. But myself, I'm originally from Ohio. My wife's a Hoosier. And when my dad was 11, I can remember he walked down to my bedroom, and he says, "We're moving to Tanzania, East Africa, to do mission work." And Andrew Conley was up holding a gospel meeting and convinced him to go. And I looked at him, and I can remember I said, "We'll have fun because I'm staying right here." Well, unfortunately, I was dragged there. I don't want to say unfortunately, because it's become basically home. And we've been in and out of Tanzania ever since. I've got 2 younger brothers, a younger sister, and I'm the eldest, but we all speak Swahili, and that really comes in handy in America, But we all speak Swahili, and I got 4 or 5 Swahili websites. So, when the web became a thing, I bought the Canisa La Cristo site, the Canisa La Cattolici, the Canisa La Luteri, the Canisa La Baptisti. See, I don't need to translate those, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? Then I got the Mashahidi Yehovah now. I may need to translate that. That's a Jehovah's Witness. So I got all those sites. And so anytime, there's 100 million people that speak Swahili. It's the fastest growing language in Africa. So anytime someone goes to those sites, well, guess what you get? You get the Canisa La Cattolici, and the first article is about, can you pray to Mary? And is Peter really the Pope? So I get beautiful emails from time to time telling me how horrible of a person I am. But, we reach and make a lot of contacts through those sites. So my wife and I did come back to America full time, I guess, end of 2007. And I've been working at schools of preaching here in America since. So that's basically our trek of life. Now, these are most of our instructors. Since we're in the DFW area, our full-time staff is only 4 people right now. The rest are part-timers, and these are all preachers from local congregations. And those that have a year or a number behind their name, that's when they graduated from Brown Trail themselves. So they'll teach 1 or 2 classes. Sometimes they'll teach them for free. And since I control the finances, I appreciate free. That's very important to me. But they're all doctrinally sound. We all see eye to eye in Scripture. We've lost a couple over the last few years. The second one down from me, Obed Rodriguez, we lost him because of COVID. It went through his family like you wouldn't believe. That very first November, he died of COVID. His wife died 3 weeks later of COVID. His mama died in March the next year with COVID, and his father died the next June with COVID. and his father was the only one with a pre-existing condition. So there's just no rhyme or reason to it, right? Just some families that swept through it. It wasn't genetics, because I don't assume him and his wife were genetically related to one another, especially since he was Spanish and she was white. So it wasn't genetic. There's just no rhyme or reason to it. So we lost all of them, and they left a 21-year-old daughter. And, I'm sure most of you, if you're like me, you've had to close out estates and things like that, and it's never fun, never easy. And I've often wondered how hard it had to be on her to close out 4 in a year when you're 21. That's the last thing in the world you'd want to do. So family has taken her in East Texas, where she lives now. Then we lost Drew, who was right beside him, Robeson. And Drew is a great evangelist. Born and raised there in Texas. He was preaching in Waxahachie, and he heard of a congregation in New York. Dutchess County, yeah, thank you. Dutchess County, New York. The only congregation in the county, it shut its doors. So he decided to go up there and revive it. And, he's never really seen real cold. We don't get real cold in DFW area. They think they do. But, lake effect snow is what I'm used to up in Cleveland. You go to bed one day and it's 70. You wake up the next day and you get 3 feet of snow, right? That's just fun. That's just part of that world. So he went up there with his wife. They grew this congregation from 0 to 40 in no time at all, baptizing people, restoring people, doing a wonderful job. And I called him the end of his first January there. I asked him, I said, "How you doing, Texan?" He wasn't very happy with my questions, but he took a picture. There was snow everywhere, and he's like, "This is unreal." He says, "And it doesn't go away. If we get a snow in Texas, it's scant, and it goes away, 24 hours? And at least in our part of Texas." So he had a little culture shock, but he's built them up enough. He's looking for another congregation, and there's one in New Hampshire and one at Niagara Falls that he's thinking about moving to now to build them up. So that's what he plans on doing for the rest of his career. And, we can respect that. Now, our Spanish department, we are the only 2-year Spanish department in the United States of America right now. And so I guess you could say we're the worst and we're the best at the same time. But it's very famed throughout the Spanish-speaking world, and we get people that apply all the time. The only thing that keeps us from having a full house is finances. They can't raise money in America. Whereas our English students, if Troy or one of them decides that they want to attend, they got contacts, right? Contacts here in America, congregations they've been associated with, family, and we all have a spider web, as I was telling Troy about the other day. And it's amazing, if we sat down and talked long enough, we all are spiritually related to one another somehow. It's just amazing what the brotherhood's like. So the English students can raise their money. English students can't. The Spanish students can't. So I have to raise it all. And for the longest time, we only had 3 or 4 students a year. But now we're up to about 8 to 9. And we're hoping this next January we can bring in 10. So it's just from, congregations and people helping out. But all of her graduates preach in Georgia, Texas, Arkansas, Mexico, El Salvador, and Costa Rica right now. And it's a good group. But as far as our curriculum, it's the same for the English and Spanish. We have 72 classes. And to compare it to college, because I do get asked from time to time, if you want to get a degree in Bible, it's 120 or 128 credit hours, depending on whatever state you're in. But 90 hours pertain to your degree, which is about 30 classes. So someone with a bachelor's in Bible has only taken 30 classes, which means you haven't gone through the Bible. If so, it's at an introductory level, right? And then you got your Greek classes, Hebrew classes, maybe a Latin, Bible geography, and your homiletics, hermeneutics. So you just don't really get as much as you would think they get. And then if you go on and get a master's degree, that's typically another 20 classes. So someone with the master's in Bible has only had about 50 Bible-related classes. So we teach 72. We go through every book of the Bible, verse by verse. Some of the longer books, maybe paragraph by paragraph. But I teach the longest book of the Bible. And here, I'll give you a quiz. If you fail, whatever. But you might need to know this, to get in heaven. I don't know, you might not. But what is the longest book of the Bible? Isaiah. That's good. It's close. Most people would say Psalms. It's actually Jeremiah. Jeremiah has more words than any other book of the Bible. And I teach Jeremiah, and if you ever read and studied through Jeremiah, it is one of those beat-down books. You got 3-4 really good chapters about the Messiah and the kingdom, and then the rest of the time it is, well, Jeremiah, your neighbors are wanting to kill you today, and Jeremiah, you need to preach this, and Jeremiah, you better not go home. It's going to get ugly. And then you got Jeremiah's breakdowns and all that. It's a good book for preachers because you get to see Jeremiah's highs and Jeremiah's lows, and how God worked with him to get him, all preachers have lows. All members of the church have lows from time to time. And you can see how God worked with him to get him back to where he needed to be. So we teach homiletics, which is 6 classes, how to make your lessons. Hermeneutics, the interpretation of Scripture. We have exegesis classes, which are about digging into a paragraph and mining everything that can be mined in it. For preaching and so forth. And I teach all the history classes, church history, restoration history. They just assume, since I'm from Ohio, that I knew everything about restoration history because that's where the Campbell movement and Stone movement started. Yeah, I've learned a lot over the years, but, as a kid in Ohio, I really didn't care about that. I cared about the Indians and when the Yankees came to town and things like that. We also have a Moving Towards Spiritual Maturity program. It's a 1-year program for kids out of high school, college. They just want to take a year off and study the Bible. Not that they'll be preachers or preachers' wives for the girls, but it will give them a foundation for the rest of their lives. So we have that. We also have a new online program called STEP, and this is geared to those who may be thinking about attending a school preaching one day. They meet once a week for a couple hours, and it's taught by our newer graduates. So we have that program as well, and we're going to continue to develop that more and more over the years. Now, we always do our restoration tours every year, but before I talk about that, I do an email newsletter every month, and if you want to get our email newsletter, it doesn't cost you anything. You can just put your email address on this, and I'll add it to the list, but I'll start here, and we'll pass it around. But we always go to 3 different places with the restoration tour. We go to Tennessee, and we start at the Jackson Street congregation. And that's where the Black Restoration movement started. In the Brotherhood, we have 800, 1,000 congregations that we call Black Churches of Christ. I know we don't like those words, but it is what it is. And this is the mother church of them. And they had in the late 1800s S.W. Womack, Alec Campbell, and G.P. Bowser. They were 3 older men, middle-aged older, and they left denominationalism to start the restoration. And they converted a young man who most of us old people have heard of, and if you younger people haven't heard of him, you just need to research him. One of the greatest ever. They converted Marshall Keeble. And Marshall Keeble, I don't know what else to say other than he was the cat's meow. He traveled all over America during the Jim Crow days, establishing congregation everywhere. And though he was a young black man, he figured out how to work with white congregations to not offend them. There were just a lot of different things going on then. And he did a great thing. He baptized, they say, anywhere between 30 to 40,000 people. And the stories about him are amazing. Like when he was preaching in Louisiana one time and the KKK showed up and they sat on the front pew. And that was all right with him. He baptized them all the next night. So, that was the type of man he was. And just many stories about him. But Gospel Advocate has a couple biographies about him. And one of his biographies is their bestseller ever. So if you want a good read about what amazing things can be done, even in an era when everyone was handcuffed, he did great. But the Jackson Street, we start there. One of the reasons is because of geography there in Nashville. But his granddaughter is still alive. And her husband is a retired physician. And he's one of the elders. There are about 400 members of that congregation right now. And every time we get to meet with Sister Cummings, It's a great meeting, and when we're done with our restoration tours and I ask the students, which stop did you like the best, they always say Jackson Street, because they get to hear her tell stories about Grandpa, right? About the dad jokes and all those things. Then we go to Cane Ridge, where the Barton Stone movement started up in Paris, Lexington area, Kentucky. That is that same building that Barton Stone preached in the 1790s and early 1800s. It was Presbyterian, but of course it was all converted to the movement. And the reason it's still standing is because the disciples of Christ built a shell around it, a pole barn, and it protects it from the elements. So that's the original building. The whites would sit on the bottom, the slaves would sit on the top, and it's a neat little stop. And then we go to Wellsburg, West Virginia, Brush Run, where the Alexander Campbell movement started as well. And it started out there on top of that hill in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And then the whole congregation picked up and moved to Wellsburg, West Virginia, because it was a town on the Ohio River where they could get jobs and so forth. And they built a couple buildings, but the building they built in 1840 is still being worshiped in today. And it's the oldest building in the Restoration movement still being worshiped in today. So they got Alexander Campbell's original pulpit, and that's Norfleet Stitz in the picture. He's from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and he's one of our students. Now, we recently got some new student housing. It's our only student housing, and it's a big help. There's a foundation that donated the money to buy these, and we closed on the one in North Richland Hills 3 weeks ago, and we're closing on the one in Hearst tomorrow. So we're very grateful for that. One of the problems with raising student funds is rent. Rent in our area, rent everywhere is expensive, but in our area for a 2-bedroom home like that, it's going to run them $1,700 a month. And rent for a 3-bedroom like the other one, it's going to run $2,000 to $2,500 a month. So if they're raising $4,000 a month, half of that's going to rent. So now that we have these two and we're hoping to get some more in the future, that's definitely going to cut the cost. We didn't buy houses. I'm sure you all have heard, I don't know what your property taxes are around here, but a 3-bedroom small house in our area, the property tax will run you $6,000 a year. So the property taxes are just horrible. So we went with the townhomes, and that way we don't have to pay the property tax every year. And here's some of our student bodies over the last few years. They represent America well. They come from a variety of backgrounds. We've had convicts that have been converted and come to Christ, and we've had lawyers, and we've had judges who put the convicts in prison who have come to this school over the years. Several cops, bunch of teachers, just people from all walks of life. I know we don't have the pointer, but in the 2020 picture, the kid in the red sweater, he was raised a Baptist, and he was converted years ago. He's from Colorado, or his wife's from Colorado City, Texas, and he is the new preacher there at Colorado City. The black man standing beside him is Leonard Graves, and there is a children's home somewhere in New Mexico associated with the church, or there used to be. His grandfather used to work there a long time ago. But Leonard was 42 when he came to us. He had an MBA. He worked for Enron when Enron went belly up. Took another job in Dallas. And I don't know, I think it was Halliburton at the time. So when he showed up to go to school at 42, never married, no kids, nothing like that, I asked him, what type of support you're going to need. He's like, I don't need any support. And he's like, I've worked for Halliburton and Enron. I'm doing all right. Yeah, he's doing all right. He showed up in one of those $150,000 Mercedes wagons with the spinners and all that good stuff. Okay, yeah, he's doing pretty good for himself. But he's preaching for a very small congregation called Celeste. They got about 20, 25 members. And he's back to working with Halliburton. And he is a poacher. Meaning they send him all over the world to poach employees from other companies to bring them into the Halliburton family. So he's a good guy, and I always say if he shows up at your door with that big old smile, let him in, because he's about to offer you an insane amount of money. But he's a good guy. And in our 2022 class, the one in the pink shirt, he's from Oklahoma. He was a police officer. He worked the Tulsa City bombings, if you remember those. Not Tulsa, Oklahoma City bombings. He worked those, and he was the ranch manager for Governor Stitt whenever he showed up. It may be Stitt, whenever he showed up to school. And then in the same picture, Jared Hammond, all the way to the right, your left, he was a new convert himself from Mount Vernon, Texas. Does a wonderful job, and we're grateful for him. But we're seeing a lot of our new student body, our new converts. This 2023 class, Michael Dawkins, he's a new convert from Houston, Texas. Cody Martin is a new convert from Seagoville, Texas. He was studying philosophy at the university, one of the universities in Dallas, and something piqued his interest. So he showed up at worship one day, and he was baptized into Christ, and now he's a gospel preacher. We have Jimmy Dorothy with the white hair. He was a Baptist 8-9 years ago, married for a long time, and they were converted, and then his wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he told her all along, I really think I want to preach. And she told him right before she died, when I die, you go do it. So she died in February, and he showed up to start school in June. And he's preaching for 2 congregations in East Texas right now, rotating their small 8 to 10 members, and he rotates back and forth between them. Then we have Tyler Hill. He's from Oklahoma. His sister, Faith Hill, came and studied with him. So believe it or not, Faith Hill attends Brown Trail School of Preaching. And I don't know any other school that can say they have Faith Hill there. But anyhow, she came for one reason, and that was to find her MRS degree. And it was supposed to be Joey, but Joey broke her heart in the end. So I don't know what to say about that, but it happened. We have Michael Oliver in the white shirt. He didn't get the memo. Michael was Catholic. And I'll give you a lesson on providence, because no one understands providence, right? Maybe it's providence, maybe it's coincidence. Who knows? Paul dealt with that in Philemon. But he was Catholic, strong Catholic, and he worked for the city of Louisville, which is kind of north of Dallas, Fort Worth, and they had a water main broke. It busted. So they sent him to go work on it. A Spanish brother in Christ showed up to work on it as well, and they got to talking faith. And within a few weeks, Michael was baptized into Christ, and he's obeyed the gospel, of course, and he came to school, and he's one of those little fiery guys. He loves the gospel, loves the truth. He's not very patient. We're trying to work with him on his patience. He just kinds of thinks, since he converted from Catholicism, every Catholic should. He just doesn't understand. So he gets a little impatient with them from time to time. But we'll continue to work with him. And in the 2024 class, some of them, we got Tanner Smith. This is right there. Norfleet, the black man in the back. They're both new converts. Tanner was raised in Spokane, Washington, on a ranch. His parents are atheists, evolutionists. And get this, if you have high schoolers, maybe give them some Bibles, because at Christmas, one of his running buddies handed him a Bible as a Christmas gift when he was 15 years old. So he took it home, opened it up to the book of Matthew, and why Matthew, who knows? But he started reading it, and he was hooked. And within a few weeks, he was baptized into Christ. The relationship between him and his parents, not very good at the time. It continued to get worse. He didn't understand them. They didn't understand him. I mean, we've all heard about the Pacific Northwest, right? And the politics up there. So he did not understand him wanting to join our ranks, narrow-minded, gun-toting, Bible-toting, gun-shooting, you know who we are, right? So he didn't understand that. So he eventually left home, got a welding certificate, traveled the Pacific Northwest welding, and he met a young lady in a grocery store one day there in Spokane, and she was studying at the Presbyterian College there, communication and Bible. She wanted to be a preacher for the Presbyterians. And so anyhow, he met her. They got to talking. He converted her. And of course, she's not going to be a preacher anymore. But she definitely got a lot of Bible knowledge. And that will be great for ladies' days and ladies' classes and things like that. So they're going back home to Spokane in May. And he's going to be preaching up there. Norfleet was what he calls a professional boxer. I say he was a semi-pro boxer. We disagree. You would think it'd be stupid to disagree with a semi-pro boxer, but his record was 1-7. So he did the better thing. He got out of boxing. He came to Christ. His head was getting bashed in, but he's a great young man, and he's going to be going back, I believe, to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and preaching there. And these are some of our more recent grads. Our grads go all over the United States and the world to preach. Matter of fact, one of our grads preached here in New Mexico on the other side, far west, and he just passed away. I can't think of his name, but he was there for 42, 43 years before he passed away. And they called me a couple years ago and said, he's retiring. Can you send us another one for the next 40, 42 years? And I kind of laughed at him because it doesn't happen, right? But anyhow, there's a picture of Tanner and his wife. Robert and his son Cash attended. Robert's going to be preaching in Arkansas when he graduates. Davin Watley will be preaching in Mount Pleasant when he graduates. It's Norfleet's family. His wife is in the black skirt. Daughter is in the multicolored skirt. And then he's got a set of Irish twins. I never knew what Irish twins were until I met him. One is born in January and one's born in December of the same year. So I guess that's Irish twin. And then Hayden Baker, who is from our congregation, and he's trying out for an internship in Porter, Oklahoma this morning. And then some of our Spanish students from Costa Rica and Panama. Panama here, I always call them from where they come from. It's easier for me that way because I can't pronounce the names half the time. But Panama, he only speaks about 3 words of English, but we've been having a lot of fun lately with this Panama Canal thing. And so we do let politics seep in. But he's a really smart guy, so they say, but he's got a master's in computer sciences, and he's a good guy. And then Daniel Martinez from Baja, California. Some of our new students coming in June. JJ is from North Texas. William Ford is from San Francisco, California. Pablo Arista, Anthony Blanchard. Anthony's another wonderful story, just been baptized a few years ago. And when he was baptized, his wife left him. They were from living in the Pacific Northwest. She wanted nothing to do with it. So she's living in Vancouver right now. And he's down in DFW area. And we both got our picture taken in front of the picture. And some of you old timers may remember that guy. But Tiddly Tellett, you song leaders, he wrote hundreds and hundreds of hymns, and if you search your songbook, I think there's a bunch of them that he wrote. But we wanted to kind of have a good picture, but I don't know, it is what it is. But anyhow, we're grateful to be here. If you have any questions and so forth about the school, feel free to ask, and I'll be willing to answer what I can. But we appreciate y'all very much. If there's anything we need today, it's more preachers. We have a horrible preacher shortage right now. And if you want evidence, they let me preach. So that's all the evidence that you need, right? And so we're training these kids, and we're training them for tomorrow. And if there's anything America needs, our first class was 65. And we still have one man preaching from that class. He's 86, 87 now. So you stop and do the math. He's been preaching for 6, 7 decades. And these kids were graduating like Hayden right now. 6, 7 decades from now puts us in the 2080s, 2090s. We will all be dead and gone. And we worry about the church. I've already had conversations with 1 or 2 of you about the shape of the church. We're worried about her. These kids we're training, they're our future. And we always appreciate those who unite with us to train them. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.